Hey there, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
Yeah. So this is episode 1 of Feeding the Elephant, and I have Abraham with me.
So, how's everybody doing? We're just sitting here talking about, stupid stuff and things that really don't interest either of us, trying to come up with topics, but we figured we'd take to Twitter or just pick a topic and go with it. Um, so what was that you were seeing? Chris, you were talking about the reindeer?
I logged in today. I went to Twitter, and I went on the news section, and Fox News posted.
Yeah.
And in Norway, 100 reindeer was found dead. Merry Christmas. Got hit by a freight train.
Presents are not coming for those sad children.
Actually, it's right here. Yeah. More than 100 reindeer in Norway have been killed over the last few days. Oh, so it's been going on for a few days.
It's been happening?
Hit by freight trains.
What are freight trains?
It's a type of train,
Oh,
I guess.
hilarious.
That's tragic.
It's really tragic. I don't know why I just said hilarious. I'm probably because I'm looking at my own Twitter feed. Well, I definitely wanted to talk about obviously the big topic. Let's talk about why Eminem is feeling so sad that Trump isn't getting back to him. You read the story. Why is he sad? Did you hear his last cipher? That
Eminem is sad.
the campaign speech. Did you hear it?
Did that happen today?
No, it was his last one of his last songs that he released. It was called campaign speech, in which basically he tore apart, quote unquote, tore apart Trump, and he in this cipher. It was more of a spoken word.
Is that different than the freestyle on BET he did last month?
It's completely a cappella. So there's no instruments in this song, and I say song with quote unquotes because it's just a spoken word basically. And he basically he talks about Trump and how he doesn't like Trump and how, he just talks badly about Trump. And in this same song, he divides his fan base. He talks about, hey, if you guys want to side with me, you will, but if you vote for Trump, you can't be with me. And I'm like, why are you doing this?
So that was,
You've heard this, right?
yeah, that was the freestyle last
Yeah.
month. He did on BET.
Campaign speech. He
Yeah.
did that too?
Yeah.
I didn't know he did on BT.
Yeah, he did it on BET, and it went viral. And the world started praising the rap god, apparently, Eminem.
Praising?
Yeah,
That wasn't worthy of praise.
they were in love with this video. They said he was heroic
Really?
for coming out and doing all that jazz. But at the end of the day, I mean, who's he really impressing? Not me. Trump is still president.
That is, I don't at all have a problem with Eminem. I listened to Eminem when I was a kid. And I still listen to him today. Prior to despite popular belief of what people think a Christian should be listening to. But I do enjoy his work. But I don't enjoy these celebrities using the platform that they stand on to kind of divide their audience and talk down to them. Like, do you remember what Madonna said during,
The Women's March?
I don't know if it was during the Women's March or during Hillary's campaign, but she said she would blow up the White House.
Yeah, that was the Women's March.
That was the Women's March?
Yeah, that happened right after. It was like right after the election. It was.
So much happened right after the election. Did you ever see that video of I think a bunch of liberals, I don't know where it was, but they went outside and Ben Shapiro was talking about this, but they just screamed into the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was looking at this and all I could think about is the last scene in a very dramatic movie when they're just like, no.
Yeah, I did see that.
Could you imagine just what's going through your mind in that? I can't wrap my mind around this. I'm a Latino male, and there are a lot of white people that I talk to that talk about the Latinos being oppressed. And I don't doubt that one bit. I don't doubt that there is discrimination across the board at some point. But when they talk about when these people kind of try to be the voice for me, it's kind of when I get upset. When they start taking words out of my mouth or coming up with their own and putting them in my mouth, like, hey, why don't you feel so oppressed? Like, hey, like your ancestors, this and that, the system is against you. And I'm just like, that I've never felt oppressed in my life.
Yeah, and that's the problem with identity politics. And that's because that's what it is like, I mean, what the left does is they assign your beliefs and values based on your skin color. So they look at you, Abraham, as a Latino man, or they may look at, someone else as a black man, and they probably automatically assume that you're a Democrat, and then that your values should be aligned more with them. And then they see white males as Republicans, neo-Nazi supporters, misogynist, racist, the whole, anything that ends with obic or ist. That's what you are. Sierra Mist. I drink Sierra Mist with my white privilege.
I drink Sierra Mist with my white privilege.
I think that's the biggest problem is identity politics. Is because, man, it's like very rare, and they're out there. You'll see like famous people who are of like different nationalities coming out and support Trump. Do you ever see that one black dude who's like really vocal? He still goes out and like during these protests, and he has like a "Make America Great Again" hat. It's like he's a black guy. I don't know his name. He's hilarious. He's super pro Trump, and it throws everybody off because he's black.
I'm guessing he's a comedian.
No. He's just a regular citizen, but he's kind of like more popular because he's just like very vocal about his support with Trump and everything.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of the way I was looking at it when Trump got elected was, just like with every other president we've ever had, if he does good things, I'll praise him, and if he doesn't, I'll hate him. Yeah. But as far as I've seen in the media, Trump has done a lot of talk, but he doesn't actually do anything. Yeah. That ban on transgender people in the military, that wasn't an actual thing. He never did that. He never said that. He tweeted a couple of things, and people kind of align that with thinking that he was banning trans people from joining the military, and that's not at all what he was saying. It never actually took effect, never happened, but people jumped on it so quickly based on like their fears and what they already thought they knew about Trump, like being this hateful person. And again, like I'm saying, I don't support anybody who wishes bad things on other people, but I also can't speak for him. I had this problem when I am a college student, and I am in class one day, and we talk about, how we start talking about different sides of politics, and somebody starts referring to like the Democrats and the liberals, and they're like, yeah, because obviously, everybody, all these these big universities are super liberal now.
My schools.
They're insanely liberal. It's insanely liberal.
I go to an art school.
Oh man, that's as liberal as it gets. But I go to a community college. I go to San Diego City College, and we were in this class, and we were talking about left and right, and everybody was kind of praising the Democrats and praising these safe spaces that people give for each other. And I just thought to myself, my dad was never raised with any safe spaces. He didn't raise me to believe in the safe spaces and think that I needed some form of therapy dog to kind of tone me down if somebody said something I found upsetting. Yeah. You're going to receive constructive criticism, and then you're going to have those people that are just hateful, no matter where you are on the spectrum. If you're liberal, if you're conservative, you're going to find those people anywhere, really. And I just found a problem with it because these people, they would assume that because I am conservative, that I automatically align with everything that Trump believes in. They kind of see Trump as the poster child for conservatism.
Which he's not.
And he's not. A lot of these conservative people,
he's kind of the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, he's, especially now with the way he's speaking, the way he's acting, he's more liberal than anything. I mean, I have a big problem with people aligning Trump with conservatism, because that kind of takes a broad brush and it just takes it all over everybody. Yeah. Kind of like if we were to say that every single liberal is as crazy as Hillary is. You know, it's not the same. People have their own thoughts and beliefs, and there are some conservative values that I do line up with, and there are some that I don't. Um, for my own perspective, I agree with Trump on immigration. We should not be letting people kind of come in from the Middle East willy nilly, because you see how that's going for the UK, you see how that's going for Sweden, and we haven't, thank God, we haven't received any form of those kinds of like monstrosities.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a question. Do you think, because I tend to align more with Trump on immigration too. I guess my question is, do you think it's too one-sided as far as his immigration policy? Like, we obviously know the whole Mexico, let's put up a wall, let's make them pay for it, which we still haven't seen, by the way.
Exactly.
That's bad, Trump. Um,
Well, think about it.
but what about Canadians who come here illegally, or other countries that come here
Are you
illegally?
really scared of Canadians?
No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, but I mean, like, as far
have
as
good ham.
as far as Mexico City, even if he were to build the wall, a lot of these immigrants, they're not coming here like they think they're coming here. They're not climbing over these walls. They're not walking across the border. Some of them do, but not a majority of them don't.
A lot of them come with visas and just let them expire.
Stay their visas. Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking to myself, like, if you want to focus on immigration, you should probably focus more along the lines of like looking at who's flying, who's going, kind of do more intensive background checks and just stuff like that. Really crack down on the visas you're handing out. Like, my dad and I were having this conversation the other day, and we were talking about how they don't hand out visas anymore. They don't just, give them willy nilly like a work visa, student visa. They don't do
It's
that.
a long process. I just got mine for Brazil, just for travel. It was exhausting.
It's extremely weird. Think about that. Think about that for a second. It's weird. It's I mean, I understand where a lot of people are coming from, and I myself believe in the fact that people should come here legally. That way, they're not looking over their shoulder for the rest of their life, thinking and working these minimal jobs and working these jobs that will provide nothing but, a broken back for them. But they can actually do something with their life. I have a problem with our immigration system as well, because they make it so difficult for somebody to want to live here. Right. Like, I had a friend of mine who her father was immigrating, and it took him years upon years to get immigrated here.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of Brazilians, and unfortunately, they come here illegally because it's just easier thing to do. And it's like, as far as immigration, like we want immigrants to come here legally, right? That's the good thing to do. That's just logic. If the word illegal is before it, you shouldn't really support it.
It's very demeaning as well for some people. Like, when you talk about people that are here illegally, obviously, yeah, they're here illegally, but when you just call them like illegals, like, you make it sound like these people are like they're committing serious crimes when there are people that are just trying to feed their families. I hear that, but like I told my dad, I would much rather prefer, if I was in that situation, to tell them, hey, like, if the process wasn't so mind grueling, go out, get your proper paperwork through. That way you're not looking over your shoulder the rest of your life, and you don't have to work some bottom of the barrel job. Right. So you can come back and actually enjoy the freedoms this place has to offer, as opposed to running like a fugitive for the rest of your life.
So it has to be both sides. So it's like, we want legal immigration, great, but at the same time, as a country, we need to make it more attainable.
Yeah, but it's so weird, because if we make it a lot more obtainable, we're still facing that problem from the Middle East with not wanting to give out visas to just everybody, because that's also a very dangerous thing to do. There are a lot of radical extremists that have a very clean sheet, and they commit this insane just act of violence against humanity. Like the guy in Vegas, he was an accountant. I mean, I'm not gonna correlate this at all with radical Islam, but the guy from Vegas that shot up the country festival, that guy had a clean record, and apparently he had no signs of mental illness or anything. And then one day he just decided to stockpile some illegal weapons in his hotel room and break out a window and start killing people. It's weird, because where do you draw the line? Yeah. And I'm not talking about that in terms of like illegal immigration, but I am kind of using that to kind of swing into the next topic of like the Second Amendment and being pro gun. I think that, and if you don't mind us switching over topic, do it. Yeah. I think that Actually, I don't really understand. If you can help me, enlighten me right here, and tell me what is it that people on the left see as far as guns in being a problem. Like if guns are obtained the correct way, they go through the background checks and the paperwork and everything. Why is it such a huge problem for somebody to have the right to bear arms? Like it's in the Constitution, and it's in, and it's meant to be there in case the government decides to go AWOL, and we can fight back.
I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but I think people's biggest problem is just like, if you, like assault rifles, right?
Like AR-15s.
Um, and so I mean, a lot of the people's arguments are just like, well, you don't need an assault rifle. You don't need, 30 round magazines. You don't need like a million of those, right? Um, and it's like, it has nothing to do with, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I just don't think that we live in a very uh, sensitive generation now. So like anything can be. I think guns just scare them. If you want my opinion, I'm not going to state it as a fact. I think guns just scare them because anything can be aggressive nowadays, like microaggressions, right? Your words are physically aggressing you for some reason. And so they look at these school shootings, they look at Las Vegas, and they look at like Sandy Hook, and then like the theater shooting that happened. I think it was like
One?
during the Batman, yeah, the Dark
Guy
Knight.
that had like orange hair.
And they're like, yeah, I mean, it's in the Constitution, but maybe we could reform it in such a way that you don't need, rifles and assault rifles. Like I think Pierce Morgan was talking about with Pierce Morgan and Ben Shapiro, that old video that's really glorious to watch.
The one that he crapped on him over standing over the graves of Sandy
Yeah,
Hook.
he actually,
Oh, that was
Ben
so
Shapiro
good.
actually brought a copy of the Constitution in for
Maybe you
for
take it.
Pierce Morgan.
It's like, here, that's for you. I brought that just for you.
But Pierce Morgan was just like saying, well, let's not talk about a total ban. I guess it was kind of a compromise, but like, what about if we just had handguns, versus these assault rifles or, things like that, or like military grade weapons. And then like, cause the UK, he's from the UK, he's British, and they have a gun. I think it's a gun ban. I don't think you're allowed to have.
No, he was talking. Joe Rogan was talking to Milo Yiannopoulos, and Milo, being somebody who lives over there, he was talking about how great America is, and he was like, "Yeah, we're just fighting for our right to bear arms." And he's like, "Well," Joe Rogan told him, he was like, "Well, in your country, aren't you not allowed to own guns?" And he's like, "That's the messed up part. We're allowing in all these Syrian refugees, and I'm not allowed to defend myself just in case. I don't have a gun to protect myself." And I'm like, "Wow, that's a really good point."
I think people have too much faith in other people, and that may sound negative.
It's not negative. It's just realist. It's a realism point of view.
I don't own a gun, but I'm very much like, I think you should have the right to own a gun, because like when that amendment was being drafted, you got to understand like the context of like what it meant. We had just obtained our freedom from Great Britain.
Yeah.
And so like the possibility of a tyranny or a tyrannical government, you should be able to defend yourself, because that's not what we as a country are about. We're not a dictatorship based country. We're not a tyranny based country. And so that law, or that, not law, but that amendment was placed there for our protection, for our right to be able to protect ourselves if that were to ever happen. That's why like in Germany, when Hitler took office, people couldn't defend themselves. The Nazi regime collected all the guns up.
I just wanted to add a little disclaimer. Everything that I do say on this podcast is completely subjective on my own knowledge as far as my age goes, like being 20 years old. So from what I know so far, I know there are going to be things that I say that are controversial. There are things I'm going to say that people won't agree with, but this is what I'm going and what I believe in so far at my age. If I come across something that changes my mind, I'll definitely, reform. But as far as right now, I just wanted to add that little disclaimer, because I know I'm definitely going to be chiming in a lot, but I completely hear you. There's like, I see where you're coming from in terms of like moderation, if that's the word you want to use, like as far as guns, like why do we need big assault rifles? But
Well, a lot of the arguments that the left usually comes up with was like, well, the founding fathers didn't know that we would have assault
yeah, they
rifles.
did. They had muskets. Muskets were their military grade assault rifles.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they don't realize is like it protected what civilians could have access to back then as well, which I mean, muskets were military grade weapons. And no, I mean, look, going hunting with assault rifles isn't probably, I mean, ideally the best thing to do. I don't know, but regardless, it's there and it's our right, and I don't know. I feel like the gun debate is kind of black and white.
I kind of agree with you. There are a lot of topics that are just, they have so many different aspects to it that you can sit and just talk all day long about, like with abortion and what it means, like to like what is a life, and when does a life start being defined as a life? Well, maybe that's what it means to you, but not to me. Does a woman have the right to choose? Like, just all these different, there are a lot of topics that can be looked at from very different perspectives, and you'll get a different answer. But I think that with the conversation with weapons, I've always been, and to my age, I've always been pretty pro gun, even though I don't own a gun yet. I'm waiting till I turn 21 to buy my first pistol, but I'm pretty pro gun because when it comes to protecting your home, I don't think that you can be I don't think you can be just enough cautious, if that's the right way to put it. I don't think you can be too careful because, like you said, you can't trust people. And I hate to say it that way, but there are people out there,
Especially today.
yeah, human beings, we're selfish creatures. We don't think a lot of the time. And there are people that are out there just to hurt you. There are a lot that aren't. But if one of those people that are out to hurt others comes and bangs on my door and threatens my family, I think I have the right to protect my home. And I'm not saying like, hey, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going out and I'm going to start just shooting willy-nilly. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. I'm saying that I feel like as an American, I have the right to exercise this right. I have a right to exercise this right. And because I have that right, I don't feel like people should be looking at me in terms of like I'm just, how do I put it? How would you put it? Like you're not trying to look like some redneck just firing guns.
Right. I mean, no one's going to be riding around on cheetahs firing assault rifles. I mean, that's not the idea.
No, the idea is, even if I have a gun in the home and have it safely stored away, it's there for a just in case. It's not there for me to pull out every day and be swinging it around to my friends and be like, hey, guys, look at this gun. And no, like, there's a proper way to have weapons. There's a proper way to clean them. There's a proper way to, your time in the Marines, they taught you all this stuff. They taught you how to properly clean a gun, take it apart, and just look at this as a very deadly weapon. You look at it as a killing machine.
Well, I think what the left tends to do is they don't like personal responsibility. I don't think they like personal responsibility whatsoever, which is, I mean, having a gun is the same thing as having money or anything else that can be corruptible. It's not, and I know it's a cliche thing to say. Oh, it's the person that kills and not the gun. That pro-gun argument, which even though it's true, it's a cliche and it's true, but like at the same time, it's like there has to be personal responsibility. You could either take the gun and save yourself or save your family in a situation and be responsible, or you can be an idiot and you can do some egregious stuff, like God knows what, whatever you see in the headlines. It's the same thing with money. You could either donate $50,000-$100,000 to charity,
Or you can use it for your own.
or you can buy crack,
like Harvey Weinstein.
or you can buy crack.
Yeah, let's go with crack. Crack is a lot more.
It's perspective, people. It's perspective.
It's perspective, definitely.
And so I just think if you're a decent human being with a rational mind, I mean, it all comes down to personal responsibility. And I think that's why I think the gun debate is so easy and so black and white, because you just got to own up to your actions. And I don't think a lot of people don't like that. because I think they're just so used to like, I don't know, they're just so used to being able to blame things. You don't like your situation, but blame the system.
A scapegoat.
Yeah,
Find something to blame it on.
yeah. Blame the system if things aren't going your way, and living a life like that, I guess it just tends to seep into your other.
Well, it becomes like secondhand nature. You just tend to like automatically purge yourself of responsibility for anything that happens to you. If you're a sad person, you blame it on your upbringing. If you're selfish, it's because you were never given anything. Like, it's a matter of everything can always be traced back to something. And if these people don't trace these things back to like the root cause and they just chop it up to the system trying to go after them every single time, there's going to be no problem solving whatsoever. Yeah. There's never going to be a moment where they get to that light bulb in their head and they're like, you know what? This is why I am like this, but I can change it. As opposed to blaming it on somebody else, they should be taking responsibility for the very real actions that have happened in their life and the things they go through every single day. It's not easy to it's definitely not easy to have a conversation about these topics, especially when they take lives, because then you're talking about these issues and you want to look at them objectively, but it's so hard to do that being a human being. You're prone to emotion, you're prone to have feelings, you're prone to side with somebody. Yeah. You're always going to have an opinion. So how do you come at these very emotional topics from an objective point of view? How do you detach yourself from being a human being?
I feel you. I mean, it's hard when you're talking about these kind of subjects because you think of like that could have been your kid, or like you have to you're so quick to say, well, let's spit out the facts and constitution and amendments, and then you kind of like tend to disregard other people's feelings. Like, I know the whole like facts and feelings thing don't really mend, but it gets to a certain point where I think you're at some point. I mean, I think it's good to have sympathy and empathy and be compassionate, but you got to be able to balance it, and so like in the gun control debate, I mean, I think it's important to kind of have that perfect balance of like, here's the facts, but at the same time, I have to be able to be, sympathetic and empathetic because like this woman just lost her kid, or this guy just, lost his son or brother or whatever, that's like, that must be super tough.
You can't really.
I can't fathom that.
You can't really go.
It's easy to get into a debate on Facebook over gun control, over a situation.
That's a big problem. That's a big problem I find with that internet has like kind of taken away from us as human beings, is the ability to sympathize with one another. It's so easy to have an opinion when there's not going to be any recoil because of your anonymity. You're going to be, you have a different face online. I was talking to a friend of mine who was actually she's a journalist, and she was telling me, I was asking her, but we were talking about social media, and she was like, I've noticed that it's kind of taken the human out of humans. Yeah. It's made us a lot less.
And it's both sides of the political aisle too. Remember when I think it might have been before his inauguration, Trump's inauguration. I think he was president-elect. It was in December, I believe. Because I think I was home for Christmas, and when I read about it. But do you remember that one story about those 4 black kids that were torturing that white mentally disabled kid?
Yeah, I remember that.
And like
they were saying fuck Trump.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
I thought that was such
both sides reacted though kind of the same. So we had the Democrats being violent and saying, yeah, well, he deserved it, Trump, because the whole anti-Trump thing with the left. But at the same time, Republicans came back and said, well, Democrats, look how hateful you are. But they didn't really consider the fact that, man, that dude was tortured. Like, both sides are pushing this agenda. And I'm pretty conservative, but like, I was like I hate when both sides push an agenda, and then like I use my bias to kind of justify it. So this video comes out, and it's like, oh yeah, this is great proof that Democrats are horrible people and that leftists are crazy, without regarding the feelings of that kid or his parents, what his parents might be going through, the mental stability after that. You don't take that into consideration because you're so focused on proving to your friends on Facebook that, hey, Democrats are evil.
As far as using like an action, like a tragedy or an incident to further your own agenda, I think that can also tie back into what you were saying about Ben Shapiro and Piers Morgan, where Piers Morgan was talking about Sandy Hook and how Ben Shapiro told him he basically stands on the graves of these kids to further his own agenda. It's disgusting. And I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of it, because I've had moments in my life where I'm like, well, you see,
I've done it before. Yeah.
ooh, you do it unconsciously. It's kind of like you become so numb to it. You see it on a screen and you're like, oh, it's crazy how we're in such a place in our country right now when we hear about these mass shootings and we hear about these terrorist attacks, and we don't even look at it anymore like, oh my gosh. We look at it like, again, here we go. Like it makes me feel horrible that we've gotten to that point, because I hear about these shootings, and I hear about these things happening, and I have like Google alerts on my phone, so it rings immediately with a news story as soon as something happens. And it's kind of freaked me out, because the last time that we had a mass shooting, I got the notification on my phone and I looked at it and I was just like, oh my gosh, here we go again. And it made me sad that I realized I was thinking that way, because these are a lot of people losing their lives, and we've become so numb to it because it's happening so frequently. And all you can think about when this happens is like, well, let's see what both sides of the spectrum have to say about it.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to use this and try to bend it towards their political party?
Yeah. And it's crazy too, and I'm going to throw another spin on it, because like you mentioned earlier before we started how like you wanted to be able to incorporate like even religious talk into the podcast, and that you started getting back more into like the church scene. And I go to church, and but what's even crazier about all that is like having that empathy, and then tying religion into it and saying, well, as a Christian, like, how much more empathetic and sympathetic I should be. Because the whole, like, because the Christian worldview is a lot different than just your average Joe worldview. Because, like, at least with Christianity, like, you have to always kind of think of a mindset in terms of people. You always have to think of a mindset of, like, at some point, they're going to be somewhere for eternity. And, like, that's a huge thing to think about.
Every single person.
Every single person.
That is such a huge thing to think about. But
and I disregard that sometimes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I completely hear you. In terms of like talking about Christianity, I think I can be perfectly honest when I'm talking about my own religious perspective, and that is that, I feel like, especially here in the West, in terms of the church, and I want to just completely say and disclose, I am not whatsoever like bashing on the church or anything, but this is I'm seeing from my own personal opinion. The church in America now, it's just become such a concert hall. And I'm not talking about like small church, mom and pop churches. I'm talking about how a lot of these motivational speakers have taken Christianity and they've bended it in their benefit to kind of sell books, to get people on the pews, and to preach to them the wrong word. Yeah. I've had a problem. I noticed that when I was attending a specific church, but I was trying to disregard it as much as possible at the benefit of my own quote unquote salvation. I was like, you know what, maybe this is where I'm meant to be, this is where God wants me to be, so I'll just completely ignore the problems that the church is having at this moment in time. but it's become a lot more clear because this specific church, it was a pastor, and this pastor would start talking, and it was good. They had very biblical truth, and he'd be honest. Like, being Christian's not easy. Being a Christian is not going to get you rich. But then this same church, only a month later, started inviting these motivational speakers to come and promote their books at a Sunday service. So instead of the pastor speaking, it would be these motivational speakers.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, I'm not cool with this anymore, because we start going from the very truth of what the Bible teaches about, it's not always going to be easy. I need you guys to understand that following God is about something more than just waiting for him to make your life better. Yeah. That you need to be able to follow him despite things getting rough. That if he doesn't get you that girl that you want, that if he doesn't get you that car, if he doesn't get you that job opportunity, that you're still supposed to be following him. And these churches, and I'm saying churches because it was just more than one that I attended, they started talking about Christ in the sense of, well, if you believe in Jesus and if you pray hard enough, he'll make all your wildest dreams come true. And he'll make you rich, and he wants to bless you. And I don't deny that whatsoever. I don't deny that God wants to bless us. I don't deny that one bit. But I deny that I do deny that that people saying Christianity will always be easy to be true. I find a big problem in that, because then you're telling people that when they're going through these hardships, when they're facing the most difficult parts of their lives, that they're being a bad Christian. Right. That if they're not doing a certain thing, or if they slip and they fall, or if they act a different way, or if they listen to different music, that doesn't make you a Christian.
Right. Like, it's kind of like these prerequisites, like almost like yeah, you have to fill this list out in order to be the Christian.
Well, what is a Christian? Like, when you first got saved and you heard about someone being a Christian, what came to your mind? Like, you hear about somebody and they're seemingly perfect, right? They listen to just worship music. They go to church all the time. They're always reading their Bible. They're lame because they don't indulge in the things you indulge in. They don't stand for tattoos because of Leviticus, that one verse that somebody said that one time. They wear sweater vests. They come to your door and they knock, and which those are Jehovah's Witnesses. But sometimes people correlate them with being Christian, and I'm just sitting here like, well, if that's what Christianity is supposed to be, then I am in the completely wrong branch of religion, because I'm not like that whatsoever. And I thought, when I started going through that, I thought myself that I was doing something wrong. And this church kept enforcing that image of the proper Christian, of you can't do this, of you can't act this way, you can't, be this way, you can't be angry, you can't be angry at your neighbor, right? And you can't. And to me, that sounded very Old Testament like, because it sounds to me like you're filling out that you're doing this checklist of what you think you should be doing in order to receive salvation. And I'm just like, that sounds to me like religion. Yeah. That doesn't sound to me like a relationship with Christ, because if we're talking about somebody who's seeking you no matter what, somebody who wants a relationship with you, and this is somebody that you don't know even exists at the time, if they're seeking you so diligently and you're not following these rules, then what's stopping them from following you? What's stopping them from hunting you down and being like, you know what, I want a relationship with you? And this is what I thought about God, I thought to myself, and I still struggle with this every single day, where I'm just like, there are a bunch of things in the Bible that I don't understand. Yeah. There are a lot of things I don't have the answer to. And I don't know in my own personal heart if, the story of Noah's Ark was completely accurate. I don't know if, the story of Abraham was completely accurate. I don't know what Moses' real story was. There are some, some holes in time when they jump from one place to another, and like, was Jesus really born on Christmas? Which I talked to Josh about that already, so that's like a whole different thing.
Yeah, we ought to do a podcast on that, actually. That'd be
Was he born on Christmas? Yeah. And I found I had a big.
I have to do some research on that.
We definitely need to do some research before we do that one, because we need to have like a huge disclaimer beforehand. But I just found a big problem, and it led me away. It led me away from the church for a bunch of months, and I'm barely now today deciding to go back, because I've been so far away. And what pushed me away, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, if the church is what turned you off to Christianity, then how hard did you really believe? I was like, my problem isn't with God. My problem was never with God. It was the way that the way that it's structured. It's so much more about serving yourself than serving others now. Back when, if we're going to talk about the real apostles, Jesus said, don't take any clothes with you. Just take the sandals on your feet.
It's very radical.
And go. And if a town doesn't accept you, go to the next one.
Yeah.
He's like, where will we stay? Well, you'll find a place.
Yeah.
And if they don't accept you, shake the dust from your sandals and go to the next town. That's what he wanted us to do. And a friend of mine, who is Jewish, by the way, we were talking about Christianity and just worldly religions, and how sometimes they can use their message to play on the weak people. Like, sometimes people just want an answer for something, and this is the only logical thing they can believe in, if not anything. So I think that's a very true thing too. I think that sometimes these preachers or these mega churches will use their leverage and bring in famous people to be like, you know what, it gets better.
That is a thing, and unfortunately, it's like when people do see that, when people look at like Joel Osteen or Benny Hinn, and yes, I'm dropping names here, TDJ.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you about. He went to the Rock like only a month ago.
When people see that, they're gonna automatically think like, well, that's what Christianity is. It's a bunch of people in suits who own private jets, who own houses, who manipulate people to, sow their seed of $1,000, and God will return it 1,000-fold. You just wait. And then Benny Hinn is doing like these weird like healings on stage, and I'm by no means saying that healings aren't a thing or it can't happen, but like Benny Hinn is just like, he's crooked. He's crazy. Like when you start convulsing on stage in front of cameras, like a part of me is just like, that has to be an act. But people see that and they're like, well, that's Christians. That's Christianity, right?
It's a form of radical practice.
Yeah, but it's like it's not. It's the total opposite. Yeah. But like people aren't gonna think like people who don't believe in Christianity aren't gonna split hairs like that. Yeah. And that's what makes and that's why I think there's so much like conflict within Christianity, because like
look at the millions of denominations. Look at the millions of denominations now. I mean, people take one piece of scripture out of context, and it changes the entire meaning of the Bible.
And like I'm quick to say that Christians will be quick to split hairs and say that's not what the Bible teaches. Yeah. But the regular average Joe who's not a Christian, who's just like seeing people like Joel Osteen taking money for that, pretty much, then that's what they're associating Christianity with, is just like prosperity theology and gospel, like prosperity teachings, like give us all your money so God can make you rich, and then God never makes him rich, because that's not what the Bible teaches. That's a reality for some, that God makes rich, but it's not a reality for everything. And then when you have preachers say God wants you rich, and then people on the outside of that are just like, that's no, I want nothing to do with Christianity, because it's full of phonies, it's full of liars, it's full of thieves, it's full of manipulators.
No, I hear you. And that's kind of what turned me off to it at some point in time, is, I was definitely in a spot in my life where I was just like feeling vulnerable, and like there's got to be more to life, and it led me in the direction of the church. And thankfully it did, because I was smart enough, and I wanted to find I wanted to find very real truth on my own, to the point where it's like, you know what, I'm not just going to listen to what the pastor has to say on Sunday. I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to go out of my own way, and I'm going to read the Bible on my own. And I did that. I went through Genesis, Exodus, and I got to Leviticus, and Leviticus was, something else. But but then I was like, I keep going through scripture, and I'm gonna be completely honest. I haven't read the entire Bible yet. I have not read. I have not read the entire Bible yet. I completely am being honest about that. But I have.
It's a long book.
When I started, but when I was saved, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start at the very beginning with the New Testament, and I'm gonna read about who Jesus was and what he had to say about me and why he loves me so much and why he died for us. And I started going through these pieces of scripture, and I started realizing, that God is up there, that he loves us. I mean, I don't know if I think that he's a tall, bearded guy, white guy. I don't know if that's how I believe in God, but I think that when there are people that will dispute their faith solely based upon the color of his skin, I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
I think that's idiotic. Like, well, the same conversation goes with whether he was born on Christmas or not. Like, if he was born on Christmas, the color of his skin, like, just things like that will divide people so easily and will get people so riled up. It was little things like this that I started seeing in the church that really started pissing me off, because I was like, if we're here to worship God, then why are we ripping each other apart over the color of his skin, over when he was born, over just stuff that should be they shouldn't be important.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be important if you're talking about this deity that that runs the entire universe and knows the amount of grains of sand that's on the beach and still loves you more than each of every miracle you see every single day in the world, all this beautiful nature you see, and he still loves you more than it, even though you commit mistakes every single day. When you think about the amount of love that God has for you, and you still decide to just dispute with somebody over the color of his skin, I'm just thinking to myself, like, why?
Yeah.
What good does that do for any of you? If he was white and you said he was white, what is that going to do for you if you're right? Yeah. Is that going to make you believe harder because he was a white guy and you were right? If you said he was a black guy and...
It's like, at the end of the day, why?
Like, it's not going to be the end of days and he's going to come on down and you're going to see him and he's like, oh, damn it, he was black. Like, you're not going to be like that.
Exactly.
Like, why does it matter? I just think it's such a stupid thing that people will dispute these little things over him.
It's kind of like the whole argument, like, between, like, tithes versus offering. Should we give 10%, or is it like we just give according to how God has called you to give? It's like, why don't you just give however you feel like you should give? If it's 10%, cool. If it's 20, 30%, if you want to donate your entire paycheck, then hey, steak and shrimp at church. But like, I don't like when people like debate topics like that. And I've done that before in the past, where you like get caught up in the moment and you love a good debate and a good conversation. Even there's nothing wrong with that, but like, what are your motives? Yeah. Especially regarding religion. Like, what are your motives? Like, if you're debating something, it better be pretty essential and worth debating. Like, there's a difference between debating how much money you should give versus debating a person who claims to be Christian and denies, like, everything about Jesus. There's a difference between that. One is huge, one is not.
There was a I forgot what, I don't know if it was a podcast, or I think it might have been Philosophize This, but I don't know if it's him because he's agnostic. But I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about what to do when somebody comes up to you and you're talking to them and they're atheist or they're agnostic, and you ask them, if they believe in God, and they're like, no, they don't, obviously. So you're like, okay, do you hope you're right? And if the person, and based upon the answer to that, you will know whether you want to talk further with them, because the guy said, if they say, I hope I'm right, it's because they're completely closed off to it. They don't want to believe in a higher power.
Yeah.
They don't want to leave an opening to it. They're just, if you talk about that to them, it's kind of like an easy way to poke a bear in the stomach and get him pissed off. It's like looking for an argument. But if this person says, I hope that I'm wrong, then you know that either at some point in time they believed in God, or they want to believe, they want to see some truth. Because a lot of these people that claim to be atheists, a lot of them are just agnostic. I was agnostic at some point. All I needed was like a little push and be like, you know what? I just need to see some truth. I don't want to believe that there is no God. I don't want to believe that there is nothing after this life. Who wants to believe that? Who wants to believe that there is nothing after this?
It's depressing.
It's a sad thing, because think about it. You work your entire life, like
Pay bills,
pay taxes, pay
die,
bills.
kind
You
of
get a
stuff.
wife, you have beautiful kids, you have a home, you built an empire for yourself, and then you die. And there's nothing after that. And then your kids die. Like how depressing is that to think about? And then the sun explodes and the world dies, and then some alien dinosaur hybrid crawls out of the ocean and starts all over, apparently, according to what you believe in. But it, everybody wants to believe in something.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe in my heart that, Jesus is the way, because of things that I've experienced, spiritually and, physically, and just things I've gone through.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe that Jesus is the way. I don't know the answer to everything though, but I feel like if I did, then you'd be God. Yeah. If we knew the answer to everything and why things happen, then we'd be God.
Yeah.
Then we would resign the necessity for salvation. And I heard this I don't know if you saw this thing I posted on Instagram, where it was like how to talk to a Christian girl, and then one of them had like a giant X, and it said hi, and the other one I forgot who the picture was of, but it said, you contribute nothing to your salvation except the sin that made it necessary. Yeah. And I was like, well, okay.
Like an old theologian.
It had an old theologian. I was like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
No, so I don't feel, according to my knowledge of what I know this, I'm only 20 years old. The world has been around forever, and I'm only 20. I know like a fraction of a percentage of what the world has to offer, and even this is overwhelming sometimes. Yeah. I know that there are things that we will never find out. I know there are things that we as Christians, we as human beings, we as a human race, we won't find out. We'll never get the answer to. And I think that even if we did get the answer to some of these things, it wouldn't satisfy us. Yeah. It would just raise more questions. Like if people would be like, why do bad things happen? If God gave you an answer, would you be like, oh, okay, cool.
You would just find it.
Or would you be like, well, but why? We are so limited to the dimensions of our own head that we think that we know best. The way we take our lives, the way that we go according to tradition, we think that we're right every single time. And even when we're wrong, we refuse to admit it. Yeah. Because it's a pride thing. It's a primal thing, you don't want to be wrong. You want to be sure you know what you're talking about, especially if your ego rides on it. But, when it comes to these huge questions, even, what's the meaning of life? Where did we come from? What was the Big Bang? A lot of people, these are questions that I personally believe we will never have the answer to.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you.
We will never get that far because, think about it. We've been around for how long? I'm not going to answer that question because it's going to rise a whole nother debate. But, yeah. but as long as we've been around, we still haven't discovered what's at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
And we want to inhabit another planet. So I'm just thinking, to me, in my head, I'm picturing, this little kid eating a candy bar, and he doesn't finish it, and he wants to open up another one. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking to myself, we haven't discovered all that this world has to offer, that this planet has to offer. We haven't gotten all the resources out of it we can, and we haven't done so much. We haven't even discovered peace among nations. And I don't think there ever will be peace among nations. I think that as high as these presidents and dictators go, despite all that, man is still fueled by power and by rage and by ego. Everybody wants to know, pardon my French, but everybody wants to know who has a bigger dick. Everybody, like, Trump, obviously, like, he's a very egotistical man. And Kim Jong-un, I mean, he needed a gold statue made of him to make him feel relevant.
He's super young.
How old is he?
He's like in his 30s. He's like 31 or 32.
Looks like my boss.
He's not aging well.
Is he? I thought he was a lot older.
He's pretty young.
I thought he was a lot. Well, look at that country. Look at that country. It's really scary. Like, think about being born into
the whole
nation like that.
The whole North Korea United States thing is interesting because, like, they've been pretty vocal recently, and Trump and Mattis have been firing back as far as, like, you better not mess with us because we will, like, without hesitation, obliterate you. And it's cool. What's cool? What's funny about that is I like General Mattis. He was like,
I like him too.
Like, in the Marine Corps, he was a god among us. And so, like, when he was selected for Secretary of Defense, like, every Marine was just like, yes, well, yeah, that's what we needed.
He takes the lock off of the military. Like, they were so limited to what they could do.
He's just so hardcore.
What was he? What did he serve?
He was a general
in the Marines.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah, infantry.
So he was like a legend to you guys.
He's nuts. You don't want to mess with that man. But it's funny how, like, with this, like, whole North Korea thing, how, like, and even in Eminem's little thing that we were talking about earlier, because Eminem was talking about how, like, Trump is going to lead us to, like, this nuclear war and, like, this nuclear holocaust type thing, and the whole left is getting on that bandwagon of, like, oh, Trump's trying to start a nuclear war, when it's North Korea who's been trying to bully us for, like, they're the ones bullying us, and, like, Trump is defending you, and you still want to defend North Korea? Like,
it can definitely
what are you doing?
Better. He can definitely defend us a lot less childish. Like,
yeah. I don't agree with everything. Like, I'm gonna make a statement now. Like,
he quoted Rocket Man.
As a conservative / Republican, I don't endorse everything Trump does.
Absolutely. I don't either. There are just some things to laugh at, But they were making memes out of Obama when he was in office. Yeah. Joe Biden and Obama's bromance, like they were making. Hilarious. That was, but I don't see Obama being buddy with Pence. I don't see that as a factor.
I do think Trump is more professional, and a long way. And I guess it's a good thing. Yeah. 'Cause, like, I mean, Obama and Hillary. Granted, Hillary was never president, but, like, she was still secretary or something like that. Secretary Clinton. Yeah. But she was going on all these late night shows and, like, Dancing with Ellen and, like, people with power. Like, so look, at the end of the day, they are people, but, like, these people are important. The last thing the country needs is Hillary Clinton dabbing on Ellen. The last thing we need is Michelle Obama dancing on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon or whatever. I don't know if she really did that, but I'm just, shooting out an example. But Trump doesn't go to these shows, and a lot of people probably don't have him on because they just don't like him.
Wasn't he on Conan at some point? I don't know if it was Conan. He was on some talk show.
I don't know if it was Conan. I know before the election, before the election, he would go on some of these shows.
He was on Home Alone. Just a little factoid there.
He was on Home Alone. He appointed Kevin McAllister. Yeah. And I think that was Trump Tower, wasn't it? Or was that one of
If that was Trump Tower, I need to stay at one of those hotels.
I don't know.
Those were massive.
I don't want to lie to people. So I'm going to shift it just a little bit. And we could probably end on this topic because... How
much do we have so far?
Well, I was an idiot and I didn't put it on time. It's on Bars and Beats. So I can't tell you what time it is. But anyway, got to edit that out. Timestamp. So this last topic, I think it'd be pretty cool to kind of end on is, like, we talked about politics a little bit. We talked about religion a little bit. How do you mend the two?
politics and religion?
Yeah. How do you mend the two? How do you balance them together?
I mean, like in terms of keeping like the church out of the state, or do you mean like in terms of actual faith?
Individually.
Like, do you mean like these politicians actually having like a religious bias?
Like I'll give you an example. Like I was not much more recently because I've been doing the whole media thing and keeping it separate them from my personal profile. But like before all that, I was very, very vocal on the social media about anything concerning politics. And then I had this particular person whom I'm not going to mention names for the sake of this ending up on social media. Um, and this person asked me, I got a random message. I think I was coming home from work or school. It was one of the two. And this person asks me in a Facebook Messenger.
Was this on different lens or was this on you?
No, this was just me personally. This was a few months ago. And they messaged me, personal message, DM, whatever. And and this person goes, "Hey, I see your posts. What do you think you're accomplishing talking about this?" And like because this person is also a Christian, and they were just kind of like, "Yeah, so I don't really understand your angle of like why you think all this stuff matters." And she was talking about how I would sometimes go off on rants about political issues. And I was trying to and I really did sit down. I didn't attack this person right away with endless mouth vomit of, I didn't conjure up anything. I actually sat down and read it. And you have to have a balance between the two, because you are Abraham, you are a Christian, and you are someone who dives into politics. And I guess this person was asking what's the point? Because there's these Christians, and I don't know what you think about this, but there are some Christians who only focus on that, and that's not always necessarily. And I'll say what I mean, but like if you're a Christian, you're not supposed to engage in politics. That kind of mindset, and that's where this person was coming from. Why does it matter? Because it's at the end of the day, Jesus is God and he's going to come back and everything's going to be, and that is true. But at the end of the day, politics is something you can't avoid. Everything that you do, eat, breathe, and drink, your livelihood, your job, your schooling, your life in general, is based around politics in some kind of way. And I think it's important to have that balance, but I guess this person didn't really.
Did she think that you were and enlighten me here. This person, and I really don't know who you're talking about. This person believed that you should separate politics and faith.
She didn't necessarily say I needed to separate it. But this person was just kind of what I grabbed from it was kind of like this. At the end of the day, who cares about politics if you have, your faith type thing?
Is that what she was saying or what you were saying?
That's what I was grabbing from it. And that's why I'm asking, how do you mend the two? How do you mend your Republican, conservative? Well, you're more conservative than Republican. There's a difference between conservative and Republican.
For those people that don't know what the difference is, would you mind mentioning what the difference is between Republican and conservative? Just like there's a difference between the left and a liberal and Democrat. What would you say the difference between Republican and conservative is?
Well, I think conservatism is rooted more in it's very, very limited government. It's very much you work for me.
So more or less
not the other way around.
More or less leaning into a more libertarian kind of.
Libertarian, exactly.
Well, yeah, libertarianism and conservatism was really on this. They're kind of neck and neck there.
Yeah.
So from personally, what I believe as far as separating your faith from politics, I don't. And if somebody decides to dive into the comment section or directly message one of us and enlighten me about this, I never saw any piece of scripture that talked about actual politicians. It's talked about wealthy people, it's talked about taxpayers, and it's talked about tax collectors.
The closest you can probably get is like King David or like King
But
Herod.
that was like a
but
totalitarianism. That was like a entire dictatorship.
yeah.
You know, that was a form of government back in the day where there was one ruler and he was the ruler. He was not like a president that had to go through like people that told him what to do. He was somebody who said something had to be done, and that's what the way it would be. So as far as my personal beliefs, I don't think there should be a separation. I think that, like you said, politics is something that happens in your life around you. It dictates your life. The people that we have in office are the reason we experience life the way that we do, with the freedoms and the limitations of what we do have are in place. I think that the politics that you talk about, the politics that you are involved in, have a real effect on your life. And I think that because it has such a real effect on your life, it also has a real effect on how you practice your faith. So there are forms of government in which you are not allowed to worship any other god. North Korea, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this because I might be going into uneasy ground, but in North Korea, people worship Kim Jong-un like a god. So I take it that if somebody were to be worshiping Jesus,
That's a direct threat.
it's a direct threat and opposing to his dictatorship. Therefore, you can be executed or killed. I mean, there are a bunch of Christians in the Middle East being killed right now. They're being beheaded because of their beliefs in Jesus as opposed to their beliefs in Allah. You know, right. I don't think that that is necessarily a social taboo. I think that has a lot to do with the form of government imposing one certain religion, and a religion you must abide by any means necessary. Like, you have to believe in Allah as the one way. And I mean, saying you believe in Jesus is, you know, like spitting in their face. So I think that because we live in the government that we do, with the government that we do, because we are able to speak our minds the way that we are too, I think that we should continue to practice that right. I think that we should continue to use that to talk more about our faith. Yeah. I think that should be a platform for us to be able to balance on and be like, you know what? Because I have the right to talk about it, to agree with it or not agree with it, I can talk about my faith. And in this case, my faith says that in my political views, this, and this. So I don't think that you should separate the two. I don't, because I mean, it can create a lot of controversy, but so can just being a Christian in general. Like, you can be talking from a non-denominational point of view, and you'll be talking to somebody from a different denomination, and that'll spark a fire. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be politics. There are a number of things that you can talk about that will ultimately get you in like an argument with somebody with opposing beliefs. It doesn't have to be politics. And frankly, I think from the people I've met, really, because I do know that there are a lot of like liberal Christians, but from the people that I've met that are Christian, a lot of them are conservative. So, you know, following.
And I think that goes back to the question of like, what's the difference between Republican and conservative? And like typically when you hear like a Democrat versus Republican, you know, like a Democrat would be normally pro-choice and pro-LGBT. Nowadays, Republicans tend to be more pro-LGBT because that's the thing now that you have to kind of be now in the society almost. That's how it's set up. Like, Trump is pro-LGBT. He is very supportive of that. And despite whatever obic or ist type word gets thrown out, I mean, that's just ignorance on their part, because he's come out several times and said he was pro-LGBT and pro-gay. And that's not something you would find typically in a Republican back in the day. Conservatives, I think, tend to take it a little bit more hardcore in the sense of like, I am more pro heterosexual marriage than homosexual marriage. And I know like homosexuality is like, it's illegal. It's legal now. Excuse me. It's legal now, and it's very acceptable, and that's just the lifestyle that's, you know, it's accepted. It's socially accepted to the point to where like you don't really think about it anymore. You don't. It's just kind of normal now, you know. But conservative still has that belief of like there's more family value in a heterosexual family than a homosexual family, and conservatives they tend to be more like pro life than pro choice.
Yeah.
And so like I think for Republicans they can kind of flip flop on both of those, and I think that's what kind of separates them. Even Milo, Milo Yiannopoulos,
Of course.
he even says like he would be better off if he wasn't gay.
It's so weird. Like,
Which is funny because he doesn't believe that you're born gay. So it's kind of
does he
like,
believe it's like a nature versus nurture kind of thing, or was he raised that way? He was talking about how he believes that if you were in the womb and your mother was more of a promiscuous person, that does play a part in you being gay or not.
I don't know what
said that.
his
I was
belief
quoting
was.
him.
I do know he's very much against being born gay because he touches on that in I think it was the Joe Rogan podcast.
So he believes.
Joe Rogan had Milo on.
Yeah.
And it's like a 2-hour podcast.
I've listened to almost all his podcasts.
And so like and Milo talks about like how that whole myth was created, which was very interesting. I don't know what he said word for word, so I'm not going to try and quote
So he
him.
said it was a myth.
Yeah.
Wow.
He says being born gay is a myth, which is funny because he said he'd be better
If he
off
was
if he
straight.
wasn't gay.
Oh yeah.
If he was straight.
Yeah, I heard him say that.
But by that logic, then why don't you just choose to be straight again? So it's kind of like
I
this.
never thought of that.
Kind of like this weird thing. But anyway, I'm digressing. But essentially what I told this person, because I did respond to this person, and I was like, I think that politics, just it's in so much of our lives that it's impossible to just sweep under the rug.
It is.
It's impossible. Because think about it, man. Like you got healthcare, you have people who are in office that writes these laws, that passes these laws that affect you and your family on a daily basis. You can't not acknowledge that or engage in discussion about that, Christian or not.
Going to college, I mean, where do you get your financial aid from? The government.
And sometimes exactly, and I just think it's kind of, ignorant to say you shouldn't engage in politics because you're a Christian, and that's not what this person said outright. That's what I got from
It was your interpretation of what.
but it was pretty clear.
Yeah.
Of the message that was getting at, and I'm just like thinking like, and one of the arguments I used was like, well, there's nothing wrong like with having that healthy balance of the two. I think that's possible. Like if I have a government that's telling me that I should believe and support abortion, which is going to be a totally different topic. We're not going to get into abortion tonight. That's too deep.
Way too deep.
A lot of gray areas and a lot of like.
It's very perspective fueled,
Yeah. So we're not going to get into that tonight, folks. But it's like I'm pro life.
Same.
And so like if I have someone telling me or a government telling me that my money's funding abortions or that I should accept abortion, no. And I think from a Christian point of view, engaging in a debate or talking about the opposition of that is at the same time giving glory to God because that's his creation and I'm defending that.
Absolutely.
And I think if you have that kind of mindset, you can have that healthy balance. Yeah, abortion and homosexuality is two deep topics for now.
Those might have to be their own episodes, but okay, so I completely feel where you're coming from when it comes to like people separating because it goes back to like what you were saying about facts and feelings being separate but at the same time kind of intertwined at some point. I think it's a slippery slope. But it's very black and white at the same time. It's like you can have your own opinion, but how you were saying that nowadays it's a lot of Republicans are more pro LGBT because it's more socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say back in the days like I was still alive, but back in the days.
You can read a textbook.
back in the days, a lot of being gay was, especially like in southern states, like being gay was just not. It wasn't something that you did. There was no LGBT.
Yeah.
or maybe there was, but it was it was tiny. But you were discriminated against for being gay.
Yeah.
And I feel like now it's like a battle between the two parties about who is being more oppressed.
Yeah.
Like, people on the Democratic side will be like, well, we never get the chance because Republicans were running office when Obama was in office and stuff like this. And then, like, the Republicans will pull it back on their side and they'll be like, well, we've been oppressed because all you guys call us is misogynistic and you know, they call us homophobic and every other ist in the book that you can find, you know. So I think it's like a battle between the two political spectrums of going back and forth of seeing who's more oppressed and who gets to be more guilty and who has white privilege and who doesn't have privilege. And it's weird because people talk about white privilege as it being like this monstrous thing that's infected the system that they can't get around. But if you look at these big colleges like Harvard now, if you are a minority, you're more likely to be chosen.
Yeah, affirmative action.
Affirmative action. And I think isn't that a form of discrimination, though?
I mean, technically, yeah.
Because you're discriminating against white people.
Affirmative action was kind of like reparations for.
I can't wrap my mind around that. I can't.
I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how affirmative action kind of started. Was kind of like reparations for oppression of colored people.
Definitely. I don't find it fair. Like, I don't know why I, as a Latino male, am speaking for my white friends, but I don't think it's a fair thing. I don't think it's fair when somebody says that a Mexican person or a black person can't be racist against white people. And I'm just like, that doesn't make sense.
It's interesting.
It's
how
racist.
It's kind of flip-flopped. It's like I think we've been indoctrinated. See, we could go on for hours about this stuff.
Like, I want to add this last thing. If we're talking about racism, I think it's weird how it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Dave Chappelle can play whiteface on Saturday Night Live as Negan.
That's hilarious.
That was great. I loved it. I love Dave Chappelle. This is not an attack at him whatsoever. But
his Netflix special.
they were so good. They were so good. I rewatched them. He asked somebody for a cigarette halfway through.
My wife and I were just dying.
He was like, no, what was it? Is that a Newport? Oh, that could have been anybody. And no, okay, so like I was saying, Dave Chappelle can play whiteface and people will laugh their ass off. But if a white person were to do blackface, that's extremely racist.
Cultural appropriation, right? That's like this whole Halloween costume.
Like they
now
were
you
talking about
can't-
Moana, like this little girl dressed up as Moana who wasn't Hawaiian, and they were like, she can't do that.
And it's like, where do you draw the line? Like, where do you draw the line? There's,
do you draw the line?
because you can't, because there's just so much hypocrisy. Like, we've been indoctrinated, and this is how much power the media has. We've been indoctrinated to where now it's like they tell us to hate something, and then they use that very thing to like for example, like racism is bad. That's a pretty rational thinking. That's obvious. Racism is bad. That's what the media preaches. That's what we believe. That's what the president should believe. That's what our leaders should believe, right? But at the same time, the media is now supporting and kind of like even themselves writing articles and doing videos to where like now it's acceptable to bash white people.
Why?
It's like racism is bad, but now all these minority groups get to hate white people.
Why? Why though?
I don't know. That's actually
It's
confuses
sad.
me.
It's a sad thing. I'm not white myself, and I mean I'm pretty sure that's obvious by me saying I'm a Latino male repeatedly, but I just think that's really messed up how, especially in Hollywood is such a left. Oh my gosh, man, their right arm does not even exist.
I love Hollywood recently because they are imploding on themselves.
They are. Like, there's so much leftist crap going on in Hollywood that you never see any conservative action being taken. Like, even Meryl Streep at was it the Emmys?
I think so.
She was just talking about how she hates Trump and how she's being oppressed. I'm like, how the hell are you oppressed? While you're in your $1 million dress.
Meanwhile, some girl in Afghanistan's getting stoned for looking at another guy.
Or driving by herself.
Or driving by herself.
That's a messed up thing. I think that I wholeheartedly believe that in our country we are being like this generation has gone, forgive my language, but it's gone to shit. Like it's so like there's no strength in it. Like, and I don't mean to talk about the war veterans in terms of them being the tough ones, because a lot of them were drafted to the war. A lot of them had to go. Right. You know, it wasn't their choice. You either flee or you go to another country, but it wasn't their decision to go. Yeah. But a lot of them were more moral based. A lot of them, you know, I have a lot of elderly people in my family that, you know, were involved at that time with war. And I just thought to myself, you know, it's a really, really sad thing. You know, you watch these people kind of deteriorate mentally, and it's a sad thing. And now we're having these college students that get everything handed to them on a silver platter and scream oppression and talk about that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, there are people in Afghanistan, people in actual war, in actual countries where you can't so much as look at another man, or, you know, drive in your own car without another male being present.
Or even being just gay.
Or even being gay. Or even believing in Jesus. Yeah. Things like that, to a point where they would threaten your life, or better yet, publicly execute you. Yeah. And we have the right to scream oppression. I think that's such a BS thing to do, man. Like why does anybody have to take a turn being the dominant race? Yeah. Why? Like, I mean, white people were doing it at some point, and now I feel like we're like, it's just shifting. Like, now white people are the ones where it's okay to be racist to. Yeah. And nobody bats an eye. But if somebody puts on blackface, like, I'm not saying it's okay to put on blackface, but I'm saying if, you know, somebody puts on whiteface, it's hypocritical. Like, you're not practicing what you preach. Yeah. And I think that's so stupid, you know? Like, why are you doing any of this? What do you gain from it? How is this going to more unite us as opposed to divide us? You know, people like Shia LaBeouf are screaming, "He will not divide us." Shia LaBeouf is a character, but he's just screaming like, you know, "He will not divide us," and I'm like, where's the division? Yeah. Like, where is, like, yeah, I get that you don't like somebody that was accused of so and so, and I get that you don't like that he's like the 1%. I get that you don't like that he goes and plays golf every 5 hours. I like that you don't get these things about him. Trust me, there are things I don't like about him either. But I don't like it when people start to claim things that aren't true. Yeah. Like, because of a mass hysteria. Like, people will scream, "Burn the witch," and they'll burn the witch because everybody else said it was a witch, and therefore you need to follow.
It's well, that's why history repeats itself.
History repeats itself. It does. It's a scary thing. But as far as North Korea, dude, it's not North Korea that I think we should be worried about. It's their allies. Their allies are the scary ones. No, like, Putin is the scary one. We could obliterate North Korea. North Korea, that wouldn't be sweat off our back. But I'm saying it's their allies that are probably the scary ones. I don't know how Russia's military is set up, but I do know they're way bigger than we are. Pardon, but it's a.
China is allies with North Korea.
Isn't Russia? Aren't they all communist? Russia's a communist country. China's communist. Who else are they aligned with? I want to mess with China. China's insanely scary, dude. They create all of our stuff. So, you know, if we're in a war with them, we're not getting any of our product. Their army's huge. I don't know what their army's like, though. Like, I don't know if they're actually technologically advanced. I wonder how the Industrial Revolution went for them.
I have to research that and talk about it. Definitely. But I think that's a wrap for tonight.
It's definitely a wrap for tonight.
We got some good content. Definitely. And this is just episode 1.
This is episode 1.
This is episode 1, and I'm excited about doing future episodes. Absolutely. It's going to be so much fun, because I think what this country needs is people who may not agree on everything, you know, be able to talk it out.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Definitely.
And I think with like free speech, the whole free speech banning, and no one's like banning free speech openly, but like when you got people like Antifa and stuff, you can see like, but it's almost there, because then like because politicians endorse that kind of behavior. When Antifa uses fascistic, I'm going to go with that word. When Antifa acts as fascists to ban free speech, and then Democrat and liberal and lefty politicians support that and call them heroes, then that's dangerous water.
That is very dangerous water.
And that's why we have podcasts like these, where we drink coffee, eat pizza, and talk about hundreds of reindeer dying.
Poor man. Santa's really got a DUI this time. It's so, dude, and I can't believe we didn't even touch on net neutrality today.
Yeah.
I just barely thought about it. I can't believe we didn't touch on it, but yeah, that's definitely a big one.
Yeah.
We gotta save that one for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Episode 2, maybe. Who knows? You'll have to tune back in to find out.
Definitely.
But that is it.
Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to edit that part out. That was awkward.
Was it?
I just went, huh? All right.
I'm really happy this isn't a YouTube show.
Yeah, that's a wrap.